This is Autoline Daily, the show dedicated to enthusiasts of the global automotive industry. Consumer Reports hates that steering yoke on the new Tesla Model S and X. 10 different testers drove the new Model S and had a hard time getting used to it. Some complained about it slipping out of their hands. Others found gripping the handles made their hands ache, and others had trouble making turns. They also had issues using the flat, touch-sensitive buttons on the yoke that replace the turn signals and windshield wipers. The buttons also activate the horn and high beams. The drivers would accidentally hit the buttons or have to look at the yoke to know what button they wanted to push. But Consumer Reports did have one good thing to say, that the yoke made it easier to read the instrument cluster behind the wheel. And CR did admit that this is only their initial impression and that they will likely get used to it the more they use it. And we agree. Formula One and Indy cars have used yokes for years, so people will learn to deal with it. The Biden administration is tightening up emission standards on ICE vehicles. Automakers have to start reducing tailpipe emissions for light-duty vehicles by 5% a year, starting right now, running through 2026. That kind of caught automakers by surprise. And while 5% a year may not sound like a lot, it is. And it's going to drive up the cost of ICE vehicles, which will make EVs more competitive. In 2027, the administration wants drastic reductions in tailpipe emissions, and the EPA is now asking for comments on those regulations. We got this info from the SAE's North American International Propulsion Conference, which follows the Chatham House rules. That means we're free to use any information that came out of the conference, but we can't tell you who said it or what company or organization they work for. But you can take it from us, these new regulations are real. NHTSA announced it's opening a new investigation into potentially defective Takata airbags. The probe involves 30 million vehicles built by nearly 24 automakers from model years 2001 to 2019. The issue once again involves the bag's inflators and includes both vehicles that had the inflators installed when they were built and inflators used in previous recall repairs. While NHTSA says there isn't a present safety risk, it needs to study the long-term safety of the inflators. The previous Takata airbag recall resulted in 67 million vehicles being called back in for repairs, the largest in history. Meet the 2022 Toyota Tundra, which is all new from the ground up. And one thing's for sure, Toyota really studied the F-150, Silverado, and the Ram when it went to work on the new Tundra. So starting from the ground up, the Tundra features a new high-strength steel frame. Bolted to that is a newly developed front suspension system and a new multi-link rear suspension, which, like the Ram, replaces leaf springs with coil springs. Active dampers are also available for the first time. The setup allows for maximum towing of 12,000 pounds, an increase of over 17.5%, and max payload of nearly 2,000 pounds. Just like the F-150 with its EcoBoost engine, the Tundra gets a twin-turbo 3.5-liter V6 engine that's standard. It puts out 389 horsepower and 479 pound-feet of torque. A hybrid is also available. It uses the same engine, but with a hybrid motor generator mounted between the engine and transmission, which is a 10-speed unit for both setups. And it gets a nickel metal hydride battery located under the rear seats. That's cheaper than a lithium-ion battery, and while it's also heavier, weight doesn't matter as much in a big pickup truck. The hybrid generates 437 horsepower and 583 pound-feet of torque. The interior design, we'd say, is a little like the exterior design, rugged, mixed with a little bit of technology and sophistication. It's highlighted by an available 14-inch display screen, but so you know, an 8-inch screen is standard. As for the exterior, all of the Tundra's accessories look clamped or bolted down, which adds to the ruggedness. Also note how it has that similar design element to the Toyota Corolla Cross, where the body color cuts into the bottom of the wheel arches that appears to clamp the body down to the wheels. The TRD model adds a number of exclusive design elements and off-road components as well. In total, there are 2 cab and 3 bed lengths available, and speaking of the bed, it's made of a composite material reinforced with aluminum. The all-new Tundra will be on sale before the year is out. And while we're on the subject of Toyota, it continues to try and learn about the challenges of a hydrogen society through its racing efforts. In its first 2 stints with hydrogen-powered race cars, Toyota tested the use of hydrogen, then the producing of hydrogen, and now it wants to test the transporting of hydrogen. The hydrogen used to power the race cars will be produced from Australian lignite or brown coal, and then be transported to Japan using the world's first liquefied hydrogen carrier ship, which was built by Kawasaki. To ensure it's a completely clean supply chain, the fuel will be transported to the racetracks with biofuel and fuel cell electric trucks. Toyota says it will also have plans to use the hydrogen transported from Australia by the mid-2025 in its efforts to help realize a hydrogen society. Honda announced it plans to sell 70,000 units annually of its all-electric Prologue SUV when it launches in 2024. The Prologue is being co-developed with General Motors and is based on GM's Ultium platform. GM will also build the Prologue along with another electric SUV for Acura. Honda also plans to introduce EVs built on its own architecture after the launch of the Prologue. The automaker said it plans to sell 500,000 BEVs in North America by 2030 and be 100% zero emission by 2040. Honda is also complaining about the Biden administration's proposal to give extra incentives for EVs made with UAW labor. So that makes us wonder if the Prologue will get those extra incentives, since GM will make the Prologue with UAW labor. But we also think it's unfair to American workers who make electric cars who do not belong to the UAW to be penalized. The UAW has been racked by corruption, and its 2 past presidents, along with a number of officers, are now in federal prisons. While we're not against unions, you can't penalize workers who do not want to belong to an organization like that.
Mobility is becoming electric, connected, and autonomous, just like the manufacturing world. But will always be one thing: a reliable partner for our customers.
We want to know what drives your testing. OTA, connected car, diagnostics, remote testing. Intrepid Control Systems is here to help you work from anywhere. Intrepid Control Systems, driven by your data.
Tesla's exports from China are booming. From January to August, it exported over 97,000 cars from China, even to the U.S. market. It's the first time we heard about Chinese Teslas going to the U.S., but that's according to Tesla China. In fact, through June, Tesla accounted for 1 out of every 3 electric cars exported from China this year, according to the China Passenger Car Association. Tesla announced a couple of months ago that it was going to use its Gigafactory Shanghai as its global export assembly plant. The US and the EU aren't the only ones worried they depend too much on foreign countries for microprocessors. So is China. It has to import 95% of the chips used for connected and autonomous cars. That's according to a former government official for the MIIT, or Ministry of Industry and Information Technology. Even more, the software for safety systems comes from outside of China too, and the software to design, develop, and verify chip designs comes from American and European companies. The former MIIT official also says China has to protect itself from external shocks. But that brings us to the end of today's show. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll be right back here again tomorrow.
Autoline Daily is brought to you by Bridgestone, solutions for your journey. Intrepid Control Systems, over-the-air engineering, boost your game. Scheffler, we pioneer motion. And by Magna.